There are decisions you make with your whole heart, and then there are decisions made with a knife at your family's throat. For Grace Abiola, the knife came wrapped in a business card at 2:47 a.m. on a January night, so cold her breath crystallized in the air. 3 men in $1,000 suits stood in her Englewood apartment doorway. The one in front, silver-haired, Korean. Smiling like death, held up his phone, showing surveillance photos of her 2 younger sisters, walking home from school, laughing, completely unaware they'd been marked. Your father's debt has matured. Miss Abiola, the man said. $240,000. We don't want money anymore. Grace's hands shook as she gripped the doorframe, her nursing scrubs still smelling of antiseptic from Cook County Hospital. Behind her, she could hear her sisters breathing in their shared bedroom, still asleep, still safe. For now. What do you want? She whispered. The man's smile widened. You. Welcome to Tales by Moonlight. I'm so glad you found your way here, and thank you for clicking. If you appreciate good storytelling and want to hear more, please verify that you are subscribed to the channel. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and let me tell you a story. Mr. Kim. That's what he called himself as he sat at Grace's kitchen table like he owned it. The other 2 men blocked the door, silent, massive, final. Your father borrowed from us 3 times over 18 months. Korean syndicate money. The interest compounds weekly at 15%. He pulled out a folder. The debt is actually $360,000 now. But we're feeling generous. Grace's stomach dropped. She was a nurse. She understood numbers. This was impossible. I don't have that kind of money. I work 60 hours a week. I can't. We know everything about you. Grace Abiola. Mr. Kim opened the folder. 25 years old, registered nurse, trauma ward. You volunteer at the free clinic on Sundays. You haven't had a date in 2 years because you're too busy keeping your family afloat while your father destroys everything you build. They'd been watching her, studying her, waiting. Your father disappeared 3 days ago. He's a coward, which brings us to our proposal. He slid a photograph across the table. This is Choi Min-ho, 32. He runs everything from Chinatown to Pilsen, gambling, protection, construction. The Dragon of Chicago. The man in the photo was devastating. Sharp cheekbones, intense eyes, a face that suggested he'd seen hell and conquered it. He needs a wife. Not for love, for legitimacy. The crime council won't grant him full authority until he's married. They're traditional. They want proof of stability. Grace laughed bitterly. You want me to marry a mobster to pay off my father's debts? This is business. Every Korean woman he courts either runs or wants his money. He needs someone with no connections to his world, someone desperate enough to sign a contract and disappear. Mr. Kim's eyes flicked to medical records. And you're a virgin, a fact that appeals to Mr. Choi's traditional sensibilities. The invasion made Grace's face burn. Here's the offer. Marry him. Attend functions as his wife. Live in his penthouse. In exchange, your father's debt erased. Your sisters relocated to Street. Catherine's Academy in Fort Wayne, fully funded, and you receive $10,000 monthly, 2-year contract. After that, divorce with $2 million. Grace stared at the check made out to the boarding school. And if I refuse? The temperature dropped. We collect our debt through other means. Your sisters are 15 and 12. There are markets for pretty girls. We prefer not to go that route, but we're businessmen. We recover our investments. The world tilted. They were threatening to sell her sisters. Ngozi, who wanted to be a lawyer. Amaka, who drew animals she dreamed of saving. I need proof they'll be safe. Mr. Kim slid papers across. Brochures for Street Catherines. Enrollment forms with her sisters' names. A letter from the headmistress. We'll drive you there tomorrow after the wedding. You can see them settled. We're not monsters, Miss Abiola. Most people don't get offers this generous. Grace's hands shook. She thought about Ngozi's laugh, Amaka's drawings on the refrigerator, the way they'd looked at her this morning trusting Big Sister to fix everything. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. I need to see the full contract. Mr. Kim's smile returned. The wedding is tomorrow at 4 p.m. The Langham Hotel. We'll send a car at 3:30. After they left, Grace sat in the kitchen until dawn, staring at the papers. When her sisters woke, she smiled and told them she loved them, and said nothing about how, in 24 hours, she would belong to a man called the Dragon. The wedding dress arrived at 2 p.m. Ivory silk, high neckline, long sleeves, fitted bodice. When Grace put it on, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a bride. She felt like a sacrifice. "Grace," Ngozi knocked. "There's a car outside." "I know, baby. Listen. You and Amaka are going to a new boarding school in Indiana. Everything's paid for. You're going to be safe there." "What, Grace?" Grace opened the door. Ngozi's eyes went wide, seeing the dress, the professional makeup, the diamond earrings. "You look beautiful. What's happening?" "I'm getting married. To someone who can help us. Who can keep you safe. Dad made mistakes, but I fixed it." "Where's Dad?" "It doesn't matter anymore. You're not his responsibility. You're mine." Ngozi was 15 but smart. Understanding dawned in her eyes, the late-night arguments, the strange men, Grace's desperation. "No, Grace, no. Don't do this. There's nothing else." Grace took her sister's face in her hands. "This is my choice. I'm choosing to keep you safe. That's all that matters." She kissed Ngozi's forehead and walked out to face her future. The Langham Hotel was gleaming marble, crystal chandeliers, expensive perfume and money. Mr. Kim met her in the lobby. "Perfect. Mr. Choi will be pleased." They took a private elevator to a suite on the 40th floor. 8 people waited. Mr. Kim, 2 lawyers, a judge who couldn't meet her eyes, a photographer, 2 witnesses, and him. Choi Min-ho stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at Chicago like he owned it. When he turned, Grace's breath caught. The photograph hadn't done him justice. 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, dark eyes that assessed her in 3 seconds. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, making him look devastating and dangerous. He didn't smile, didn't greet her, just nodded once, acknowledging a package delivery. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony took 7 minutes. Grace answered, "I do," with a steadier voice than her shaking hands suggested. Minho's voice was deep, completely unaffected. When it came time to sign, Grace's hand trembled. Minho signed with bold confidence, like he'd signed away dozens of lives. "You may kiss the bride." Grace's heart hammered. This was it. Minho stepped forward. Grace flinched, couldn't help it. He stopped. Something flickered across his face. Then he leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Brief, formal, cold. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Choi," he said, his voice carrying subtle Korean-American inflection. Then he walked out, leaving her standing in her wedding dress, dismissed. Mr. Kim appeared. "The car will take you to your new home. Your belongings have been moved. Mr. Choi will join you tonight after his meeting." The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a Gold Coast tower. The private elevator opened into what could only be described as a museum. Everything was white, black, and chrome. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. Minimalist furniture, expensive leather, sharp lines, nothing soft, no family photos, no personal items. A wealthy ghost's home. Mrs. Choi. An older Korean woman appeared. "I am Mrs. Park. I manage the household. Mr. Choi instructed me to make you comfortable." She led Grace to a bedroom the size of her old apartment. California king bed with charcoal silk sheets. One wall entirely windows, a walk-in closet filled with designer clothes in her size. Impersonal as hotel amenities. "Your things from Englewood are in the dresser. Mr. Choi thought you might want familiar items. I prepared dinner for 7 p.m. unless told otherwise. Questions? When will Mr. Choi return?" He did not say. Sometimes he works late, sometimes he does not come home. Mrs. Park's expression was neutral. "This is your home now. You may do as you please within it." Grace changed out of the wedding dress into her old scrubs just to feel like herself. She sat on the massive bed, processing. She was married, to a criminal. Her sisters were being driven 3 hours away. Her father was hiding from his cowardice. At 7 p.m., Mrs. Park served Korean stew with rice. Delicious, but foreign. At 11:14 p.m., Grace heard the elevator. Footsteps, confident, unhurried, getting closer. The bedroom door opened. Minho stood there, loosening his tie. He looked tired, something deeper than physical. Seeing Grace in her nursing scrubs, he stopped. "You should change. Those can't be comfortable to sleep in." Grace's throat was dry. "What happens now?" He studied her, then crossed to the dresser and poured whiskey from a crystal decanter. "Now you sleep. I have guest rooms. I'm your wife." The words came out small. "Don't you want—" She couldn't finish. Minho turned, and something flickered in his eyes. "Amusement? Pity? You think I bought you for my bed?" Grace's face burned. "I need a wife to satisfy the council. to look legitimate in photographs, to prove I'm capable of building something besides a criminal empire. He took a drink, eyes never leaving hers. The old men want to see me, married, settled, respectable. You give me that. But I'm not interested in a woman who married me at gunpoint. When we're in public, you'll play the role. Smile. Hold my arm. Look happy. When we're alone, you're free to hate me. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Grace? His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the distance. I won't touch you until you ask me to. She blinked. What? You heard me. I take what I want from this world. Money, power, territory. I take it all. But I don't take women who don't want to be taken. You're safe from me. That's my promise. Why? Minho's jaw tightened. Because the first time I touch you, it won't be out of obligation. It'll be because you want it, and that, his eyes held hers, dark and burning, is something I can't buy. The door closed. His footsteps receded. Grace sat in the massive bed, mind reeling. She was safe. Her sisters were safe. The threat was neutralized. But Minho's vow felt more dangerous than any violence. Because now she had time. Time to see who he really was. Time to understand the man behind the dragon. Time to decide if she could ever want to close the distance between them. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered. Lake Michigan was black and endless. And somewhere in the guest room, her husband, a stranger who'd promised not to touch her, was probably pouring another whiskey. Grace pulled the silk sheets up. They were soft, expensive, foreign. Everything here was like that, beautiful and cold and utterly alien. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about how, for the next 2 years, this golden cage would be her entire world. Have you ever felt trapped in a situation where every choice felt like a loss? Tell us in the comments. Grace woke at 6 a.m. from habit, her body clock still programmed to nursing shifts. The penthouse was silent, bathed in morning light that turned Lake Michigan silver. She found Minho in the kitchen, already dressed in a Tom Ford suit, drinking espresso while reading the Wall Street Journal on his tablet. He looked up when she entered. Coffee? He gestured to the espresso machine, something Italian and complicated. I don't know how to use that. He made her coffee without comment, slid it across the marble island. It was perfect, exactly the right amount of cream. Somehow. Mrs. Park will take you shopping today. You need appropriate clothes for public appearances. He nodded to a black Amex on the counter. Spend whatever you want. Grace looked at the card like it was a bomb. I don't need. Yes, you do. You're my wife. That means you represent me. I won't have people saying I married a woman and kept her in rags. His tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. This is your job now, Grace. Looking the part. He grabbed his keys. At the door, he paused. There's a gym in the building. Pool. Library. Go anywhere you want. But don't leave without security. I have enemies who would love to use you against me. Then he was gone, and Grace was alone in her gilded cage. The first 2 weeks were a study in coexistence. Grace learned Minho's rhythms. He left at 7 a.m., returned between 10 p.m. and midnight. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he was always alone, no bodyguards, no colleagues. The penthouse was his sanctuary, she realized. The only place he could let his guard down. They didn't talk much at first. Grace spent days reading medical journals in the library, swimming laps in the rooftop pool, video calling her sisters at Street Catherine's. Ngozi and Amaka seemed happy, which somehow made Grace feel worse. She'd sold herself so they could thrive, and they were thriving without her. She missed nursing, missed the controlled chaos of the trauma ward, the feeling of saving lives instead of being saved. The shift happened on a Thursday night, 2 weeks in. Grace was in the kitchen attempting to cook jollof rice, Nigerian comfort food. The smell of tomatoes and onions and spices that didn't belong in this sterile space. When Minho came home earlier than usual, he found her stirring the pot, homesickness written across her face. What is that? Not disgusted, just curious. Jollof rice, Nigerian dish. I was homesick. He loosened his tie, watching her. Make enough for 2. They ate at the island, not the formal dining table. The rice was slightly burned. Grace hadn't cooked for herself in weeks, but Minho ate without complaint. Tell me about Lagos, he said suddenly. Grace blinked. Why? Because you're my wife. And I know nothing about you except what's in the background check. He refilled her wine glass. Humor me, so she told him. About growing up in Surulere, the chaos of Lagos traffic, the way motorcycle taxi drivers weave through impossible spaces. About her mother who died when Grace was 17, whose last words were, "Take care of your sisters," about the weight of that responsibility. "Your father sounds like a bastard," Minho said flatly. "He is, but he's still my father. Blood doesn't entitle anyone to loyalty." His voice had an edge. "Trust me." Grace studied him across the island. "Tell me about your family." Minho's expression shuddered immediately, but after a long silence, he spoke. "My father, Choi Sung-min, came to Chicago in 1987. Mid-level enforcer for the Korean mob in Seoul. Relocated here to manage American operations. He built the empire from nothing. Brutal, efficient, feared." Minho's jaw tightened. "He taught me the business by throwing me into it. At 14, I was collecting debts. At 16, I watched him break a man's hands for stealing $500. At 18, I was running operations in 6 states. Where is he now? Dead. Heart attack 3 years ago. Dropped dead in his office, still gripping his whiskey glass." Minho's voice was emotionless. "The council won't give me full control until I'm settled. They think I'm too young, too reckless, too American. They want proof I can build a legacy, not just hold power through fear. So you need a wife to prove you're domesticated." "Exactly. A wife. Eventually children they can photograph at family events. The appearance of normalcy. But you don't touch me." Grace said it carefully, testing. Minho's eyes darkened. "No, I don't." "Why not?" "You bought me. You could—" "Because the first time I touch you, Grace, it won't be out of obligation." His voice dropped, intimate and dangerous. "It'll be because you want it, and that's something I can't buy." The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. Grace stood abruptly, clearing plates. Her hands were trembling. That night, she lay awake in the master bedroom, hearing Minho moving in the guest room down the hall, and wondered if she was starting to understand the man she married. The first public appearance happened at a charity gala at the Four Seasons Korean-American Business Community fundraiser for children's hospitals. Mrs. Park helped Grace dress, a black silk gown that hugged every curve. Diamond earrings Minho had delivered that afternoon, hair swept up. When Grace looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Minho met her in the foyer, and for the first time, she saw his reaction. His eyes tracked over her slowly, something flickering before he locked it down. "You'll do," he said, which somehow felt like a compliment. In the car, a black Bentley driven by his security chief, Choi Min-ho, briefed her. "Stay by my side. Smile. If anyone asks how we met, we say mutual friends in the hospital community. Your nursing career makes us look legitimate. Don't drink too much. Don't wander off. There will be people there who would love to see me humiliated." At the gala, Grace watched Minho transform. The cold, isolated man became charming, confident, commanding. He worked the room with ease. When he introduced Grace as "my wife," his hand settled possessively at the small of her back. An older Korean businessman, one of the council members, approached with his wife. "Choi Min-ho, I heard you married. A surprise." "Mr. Park, Mrs. Park." Minho's voice was respectful but firm. "May I introduce Grace?" Mrs. Park looked Grace up and down with barely concealed disapproval. "She's African. She's my wife." Minho's tone didn't change, but there was steel underneath. "And she's not interested in your opinion." The tension crackled. Mr. Park's eyes narrowed. Then he smiled sharp, knowing, "Of course. Congratulations." But as they walked away, Grace heard Mrs. Park's whisper, "She won't last 6 months." Minho's hand tightened on Grace's back. When she glanced up, she saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They're vultures waiting for me to fail." Later, when a drunk businessman accidentally bumped into Grace, his hand grazing her ass, Minho's reaction was immediate. He caught the man's wrist, bent it at an angle that made the man gasp, leaned in close. Grace couldn't hear the words, but the man stumbled away, pale and shaking. Minho looked at her, and she saw it the dragon the streets feared. But his hand was gentle when he guided her back into the party. Grace found him on the rooftop terrace at 2 a.m., 3 weeks into their marriage. She couldn't sleep nightmares about her father, about signing her life away, and wandered until she found the terrace door ajar. Minho sat at the edge of the infinity pool, dress shirt unbuttoned, tie discarded, shoes kicked off. A bottle of soju sat beside him, Korean rice liquor. He stared at Chicago's skyline like it held answers. "Can't sleep either?" Grace asked quietly. He didn't turn, but he didn't tell her to leave. Some nights are harder than others. She sat beside him, leaving space between them. The October night was cold, but the pool water was heated, steam rising into darkness. What makes tonight hard? Minho was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, today was my mother's birthday. She died when I was 12. Cancer. My father didn't let her see doctors until it was too late, said she was faking for attention. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Grace heard the wounds beneath. She was the only person who ever looked at me like I was worth saving. Grace's heart clenched. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But his hands were fists. What was her name? Jin Suk. She liked to garden. Yellow roses. He laughed, bitter. She used to say that even beautiful things need thorns to survive. I didn't understand it then. And now? Now I understand that beauty without protection gets destroyed. He finally looked at her, eyes raw. Is that what you think I am, Grace? Thorns without the flower? I think, Grace said slowly, that you're someone who learned how to survive, just like me. Something shifted in his expression. Without thinking, Grace reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm, rough with calluses. He didn't pull away. They sat like that until dawn, bled across the lake, two broken people holding onto each other in the dark, pretending it didn't mean anything. But it did. Minho's younger sister, Ji-woo, arrived on a Saturday morning without warning, a whirlwind of energy and shopping bags. Appa! She burst through the door, then stopped seeing Grace. Oh, you're real. Grace blinked. Did you think I wasn't? I thought you were a business arrangement. A fake wife for photos. Ji-woo circled Grace like she was assessing art. 24, art history major at Northwestern, dressed in designer black. But you're actually living here. Wow. Ji-woo. Minho emerged from his office, voice warning. What are you doing here? Meeting my sister-in-law, obviously. Ji-woo linked her arm through Grace's. Come on. We're going to lunch. Before Grace could protest, she was swept out. Over Korean barbecue in Chinatown, Ji-woo grilled Grace, but not unkindly. About Lagos, nursing, how she ended up married to her terrifying brother. Grace told a sanitized version. Financial situation, agreement, contract. Ji-woo's eyes softened. He bought you. It's okay. I get it. My brother does things that look cruel from outside. But he's not a monster. Our father destroyed something in him. Made him think power was the only thing worth having. After Mom died, Appa raised me, made sure I went to good schools, never let Dad's business touch me. He protected me from everything, even himself. Why are you telling me this? Because I've watched him for 3 years since Dad died, and he's been lonely. He'd never admit it, but he has been. And last week when I called, he mentioned you made jollof rice and it reminded him of Mom's cooking. Ji-woo smiled. He's never told me about a meal before, which means you're getting through to him. Grace's throat tightened. I don't think. You saved my brother, Grace. Maybe not the way you think, but you did. Don't give up on him. Later, when Grace returned to the penthouse, Minho was waiting. My sister likes you. She told me I saved you. Grace watched him carefully. Did I? Minho crossed to her, stopped close enough that she could feel his body heat. His hand came up, hesitated, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear the first time he'd voluntarily touched her like this. Maybe you did, he whispered. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. It started with small things. Minho coming home at 8 p.m. instead of midnight, finding Grace in the kitchen and asking what she was making, then staying to help his hands brushing hers as they chopped vegetables, the air between them charged with something unspoken. The way he'd stand close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her breath catch. One evening, they ended up on the couch watching a Korean drama Ji-woo recommended. Grace didn't understand half the cultural references. Minho explained them, his voice low and patient, and at some point she fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. She woke at 3 a.m. to find him carrying her to bed, still fully dressed. He laid her down gently, pulled the covers up. Minho, she murmured, half asleep. Sleep, Grace. Stay. The word escaped before she could stop it. Just. Until I fall asleep. Please. He froze. In the dim light from the windows, she could see the war playing across his face, the promise he'd made versus what he wanted. Finally, he sat on the edge of the bed. His hand found hers under the covers, large and warm and rough. Just until you sleep. But when Grace woke at dawn, he was still there, sitting in the chair by the window, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Their eyes met across the room, and the tension was so thick she could taste it. He left without a word. 4 weeks into the marriage, Grace enrolled in a part-time BSN program at DePaul University. When she told Minho over breakfast, she was prepared for resistance. Instead, he said, "Do you need me to make calls? Clear your schedule. I want to do this myself." He nodded, respect in his eyes. "Okay, but you take security to campus. Deal." That evening, she found a new laptop on her desk, top of the line, already set up with her university accounts. A note in Minho's precise handwriting. "For school. Don't argue. M." Grace stared at the note, something warm unfurling in her chest. She found him in his office, on the phone speaking rapid Korean. When he saw her in the doorway, he held up one finger. "Wait." She watched him work, the way command came so naturally to him. When he finally hung up, his eyes tracked over her in a way that made her skin heat. "Thank you," she said, "for the laptop. You're my wife. Your success is my success." But the way he said it, the way his gaze lingered on her mouth, suggested he was thinking about things that had nothing to do with academics. Grace crossed the room before she could think better of it. Stood in front of his desk, close enough to see his pupils dilate. "Minho, don't." His voice was rough. "Don't say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like you're thinking what I'm thinking." He stood, came around the desk, stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Because if you are, Grace, I won't be able to keep my promise. What if I don't want you to keep it?" His jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he'd close the distance. Instead, he stepped back, putting space between them. "You're not ready." His voice was strained. "When you are, you'll know. And so will I." He walked out, leaving her aching and confused and wanting. The breakthrough came on a Friday night, 5 weeks in. Grace had spent the day at DePaul, studying in the library. When she returned to the penthouse, she found Minho in the kitchen, actually cooking, not just helping. Korean fried chicken, the smell making her mouth water. "You cook?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "My mother taught me. Before she died." He glanced at her. "I thought, you've been feeding me Nigerian food." Time I returned the favor. They ate at the island, knees almost touching, the intimacy of the moment more intense than any kiss. Minho told her about his mother's garden, the yellow roses she loved. Grace told him about her mother's laugh, the way she used to sing while cooking. "I miss her," Grace admitted. "Every day, even after 8 years." "It doesn't stop," Minho said quietly. "The missing. You just learn to carry it." Their eyes met. Grace reached across the island, took his hand. This time, he didn't just let her hold it, he threaded his fingers through hers, his thumb stroking her wrist in small circles that sent electricity up her arm. "Grace." His voice was low, dangerous. "I need you to understand something. I'm trying to be honorable, trying to keep my promise. But you're making it very difficult." "Good." The word came out breathier than she intended. His eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me." Minho stood abruptly, pulled her up with him. For a moment, they just stood there, his hands on her waist, her palms flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath expensive fabric. "Not yet," he said, but his grip tightened. "When I touch you the way I want to, Grace, it won't be in a kitchen, it won't be rushed, and it won't be something either of us can take back." He pressed a kiss to her forehead just like their wedding day, but different now, loaded with promise. Then he let her go and disappeared into his office. Grace stood in the kitchen, aroused and frustrated, and more certain than ever that she wanted him. All of him. The threat came on a Tuesday morning. Grace was leaving DePaul after her anatomy class when a black SUV pulled up beside her. 2 men got out, not Korean, not friendly. Jay, Minho's security chief who'd been trailing her at a distance, immediately appeared, along with 3 other men in dark suits. The standoff lasted 10 seconds before the Russians retreated. Jay drove Grace home in tense silence. When they arrived at the penthouse, Minho was waiting in the foyer, and the fury rolling off him was terrifying. "What happened?" His voice was deadly calm, Jay explained. Minho's jaw clenched tighter with every word. When Jay finished, Minho turned to Grace. "Pack a bag. You're moving to a safe house until this is handled." "I'm not going anywhere." "Grace." "I'm not running. I'm not hiding." She stepped closer to him, saw the fear beneath his rage. "If being your wife means I'm a target, then teach me how to protect myself. But I'm not leaving you." They stared at each other, the tension crackling. Finally, Minho exhaled. Fine. But you don't leave this building without security. You don't go anywhere without telling me. And you carry this. He pulled out a small canister pepper spray, military grade. Aim for the eyes. Don't hesitate. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She found Minho in his office at 2 a.m., on the phone speaking rapid, angry Korean. When he hung up, his expression was grim. The Russians are testing boundaries. They know you're not Korean. They think you're a weakness. He looked at her with something fierce and possessive. They're wrong. What will you do? What I always do. Make it clear that touching what's mine has consequences. I'm not property. No. He crossed to her, cupped her face in both hands, rough palms against her cheeks, the first time he'd touched her like this. You're something far more dangerous. You're someone I care about. Grace's breath caught. Minho, don't say it. His thumb traced her lower lip, the touch sending heat straight through her. Not yet. Because when you do, Grace, when you finally say what we're both thinking, I won't be able to stop myself. The air between them was molten. Grace rose on her toes, bringing her mouth inches from his. Then don't stop, she whispered. Minho's control shattered. He kissed her like a man, starving, urgent, possessive, claiming. His mouth was hot and demanding, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pulled her flush against him. Grace gasped, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minho rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment you walked into that hotel suite in your wedding dress, he admitted, his voice rough. Then why did you wait? Because you deserved the choice. You deserved to want it. His hands were still in her hair, holding her like something precious. Do you? Want this? Yes. No hesitation. Yes. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and devastating. His hands mapped her body over her clothes, waist, hips, the curve of her back, learning her shape like he was memorizing it. Grace's fingers worked the buttons of his shirt, desperate to feel skin. When her palms met the hard planes of his chest, he groaned into her mouth. Grace. Her name was a prayer and a warning. If we don't stop now, don't stop. She looked up at him, saw the war in his eyes. Minho, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Something in his expression cracked open, vulnerability she'd never seen before, mixing with hunger. Not here, he said, voice rough with desire. Not in my office. You deserve better than that. He swept her up, actually lifted her like she weighed nothing, and carried her down the hall to the master bedroom. Kicked the door shut behind them, laid her on the bed with surprising gentleness for someone who'd been kissing her like he wanted to devour her. In the dim light from the windows, Chicago glittering below, Minho looked down at her with dark, burning eyes. Last chance, Grace. Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me you're not ready, and I'll sleep in the guest room like I have been. But if I stay, his hand traced down her throat, between her breasts, making her arch into his touch. I'm making you mine, completely, no going back. Grace reached up, pulled him down to her. Then make me yours. What happened next was slow and intense. Minho undressed her like he was unwrapping something sacred, every button, every zipper, accompanied by kisses that left her trembling. His mouth traced paths down her neck, across her collarbone, lower. When he finally removed her bra, his sharp intake of breath made her feel powerful. Perfect, he murmured against her skin. You're perfect. His hands were everywhere, rough and gentle at the same time, learning what made her gasp, what made her moan. He took his time, building the tension until Grace was writhing beneath him, desperate for more. Please, she finally begged. Please what? His voice was dark sin against her ear. Touch me, please, Minho. He did. His hand slid between her thighs, and Grace cried out at the first touch. He watched her face the entire time, reading her reactions, learning her body's language. So responsive, he praised, his fingers working magic. So beautiful like this. When she came apart the first time, his name on her lips, he kissed her through it, swallowing her moans, holding her as she shattered. Again, he demanded, and proceeded to destroy her with his mouth and hands until she was boneless and pleading. Only then did he finally undress himself. Grace watched through heavy-lidded eyes as he revealed the body she'd only imagined, all lean muscle and power, scars that told stories she wanted to learn. I need you to be sure, he said, positioning himself above her. Once I'm inside you, Grace, that's it. You're mine. No more separate rooms. No more pretending this is just a contract. I'm sure. She wrapped her legs around his hips, pulling him closer. I want this. I want you. He entered her slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of pain. There was discomfort, she couldn't hide it, and he froze immediately. Breathe, he coached, one hand stroking her face. Breathe through it. I've got you. Grace did, and slowly the discomfort faded, replaced by a fullness that felt right, complete. Move, she whispered. Minho did, setting a slow, deep rhythm that built the tension all over again. He made love to her like he fought, controlled, strategic, absolutely devastating. Every thrust was deliberate, designed to take her apart piece by piece. Say my name, he demanded, his voice strained with control. Minho. Again, louder. Minho, he groaned, his rhythm faltering. Grace. God. Grace. They came together, her name on his lips and his on hers. The climax so intense Grace saw stars. After, he held her close, both of them slick with sweat and breathing hard. Minho pressed kisses to her temple, her cheek, her lips gentle now, reverent. Mine, he whispered. You're mine now. Yours, Grace agreed, and meant it. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered on. Inside the penthouse, everything had changed. Do you believe people can truly change for love? Or do we just learn to love them despite who they are? Share your thoughts below. Grace woke up wrapped in Minho's arms, morning light flooding the bedroom. For the first time in 6 weeks, she hadn't slept in the bed alone. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to belong to someone who belonged to her in return. Minho was already awake, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Morning, she whispered. Morning. He brushed hair from her face, the gesture so tender it hurt. How do you feel? Sore, overwhelmed, different, perfect. His smile was slow, devastating. Good, because I'm not letting you out of this bed for at least another hour. He made love to her again, slower this time, thorough and devastating, learning all the ways to make her come apart. After, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like sex and expensive detergent, and Grace felt something settle in her chest. Safety. Home. The Russians, she said eventually. What happens now? Minho's expression hardened. I'm handling it today. They made their move. Now I make mine. Minho. Grace. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. This is what I do. This is who I am. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine, but I also won't bring that violence into this room. Into us. Can you accept that? She thought about it, really thought. About the man who'd bought her to save his empire, but kept his promise not to touch her. Who'd carried her to bed and asked permission at every step. Who'd made her feel powerful even while taking control. Yes, she said. I can accept that. He kissed her forehead. Then trust me to handle it. Grace didn't see what happened that day. Minho left at noon, dressed in all black, jaw set in grim determination. Jay and 6 other men went with him. He returned at 10 p.m., exhausted but uninjured. Grace was waiting in the living room, pretending to study but really just listening for the elevator. When he walked in and saw her there, something in his face softened. It's done, he said simply. The Russians won't be a problem anymore. Did you? She couldn't finish the question. No one died, but their boss, Nikolai Volkov, is on the next flight to New York with a very clear understanding that Chicago belongs to me, and that my wife, he crossed to her, pulled her up from the couch, is completely off limits. To everyone. Grace searched his face. You're not hurt? Not a scratch. I told you, Grace. I'm always 10 steps ahead. She kissed him then, relief and gratitude, and something deeper pouring into it. When they broke apart, he was smiling. Come on, let's go to bed. Actual sleep this time. They did. And for the first time, Grace fell asleep in his arms in the master bedroom that was finally theirs. Not his with her as a temporary guest. But healing isn't linear. 2 weeks after the Russian threat was eliminated, Grace woke at 3 a.m. screaming. In the nightmare, she was back in her Englewood apartment. Mr. Kim sat at her kitchen table. But this time, when he showed her the photos, her sisters were gone, replaced by images of Grace herself, older, hollow-eyed, still trapped. And Minho was there too. But distant, cold, looking at her like she was property again. Grace. Strong hands on her shoulders. Grace, wake up. You're safe. I've got you. She came awake, gasping, disoriented. Minho's face swam into focus, concerned and close. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize." He pulled her against his chest, one hand stroking her hair. "Breathe with me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. He guided her through the panic attack with patience born of experience. When she finally calmed, she realized her face was wet with tears. "I thought I was okay," she whispered. "I thought, now that we're together, now that the threat is gone, I'd be fine. But I keep having these dreams, where none of this is real, where I'm still trapped." Minho was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When my father died, I thought I'd feel free. But for months, I kept waking up expecting him to be there, expecting to still be under his control. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the circumstances change, Grace. It takes time. However long it takes. And I'll be here for all of it." He tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. "You're not alone anymore. You don't have to be strong every second. You can fall apart, and I'll hold the pieces until you're ready to put yourself back together." Grace's throat tightened. "I was so scared. In the dream, you didn't want me anymore. You looked at me like I was nothing. Look at me now." His voice was fierce. "Really look at me. Do you see anything but love?" Love. He'd said it so casually, like it was obvious, like it had been true for longer than either of them had admitted. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you, Grace Abiola Choi." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you when you're strong and when you're falling apart. I love you in the morning when your hair's a mess, and at night when you steal all the blankets. I love that you're going back to school. I love that you make jollof rice when you're homesick. I love everything about you." Grace started crying again, but different tears now. Relief, joy, wonder. "I love you too," she managed. "I think I have for weeks. I was just too scared to admit it. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to have nightmares. You're allowed to take all the time you need to heal." He lay back down, pulling her with him, arranging her so her head was on his chest. "And I'll be here. Every night. Every nightmare. Every moment you need me." Grace listened to his heartbeat steady, strong, real. This wasn't a dream. This was her life now. Messy and complicated and still healing, but hers. "Minho? Thank you. For keeping your promise. For letting me choose." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for choosing me." The next morning, Grace made a decision. She found Minho in his office, reviewing contracts. When she walked in with a folder of her own, he looked up with interest. "I want to renegotiate our contract," she said, setting the folder on his desk. His eyebrow rose. "Oh, the original says 2 years. Then I can leave with 2 million. She opened the folder, showing him the addendum she'd drafted. "I want to add a clause. If I choose to stay past 2 years, which I do, the money gets invested in a nonprofit I want to start. Medical clinics in underserved Chicago neighborhoods. Englewood, Pilsen, Little Village. Places where people can't afford health care." Minho studied the papers, then looked up at her with something like pride. "And," he prompted, sensing there was more. "And I want my name on the lease for this penthouse. Equal ownership. Not as your wife, as your partner." She held her breath, watching him process this. She was asking for real power, real equality. Not just in the bedroom, but in everything. Minho picked up a pen. Without hesitation, he signed the addendum. "Anything else?" he asked, amusement in his voice. "Yes." Grace rounded the desk, sat on the edge right in front of him. "I want you to know that I'm not staying because of the contract anymore. I'm staying because I want to, because I love you, because this is my home now." Minho stood, pulled her off the desk and into his arms. "Grace Abiola Choi, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever met. You were bought as property and became a queen. Build your clinics. Take my money, my name, my power, use it all. Make this city better than I've made it. Our city," she corrected. "We'll make it better together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her until she forgot about contracts and clinics and everything except the feeling of being loved, chosen, home. 6 months later, Grace stood in the lobby of the first Abiola Choi Community Health Clinic, watching her dream take physical form. The building was in Englewood, her old neighborhood, where everything had started. The waiting room was warm and welcoming, painted in soft blues and greens. The exam rooms had state-of-the-art equipment. The pharmacy would offer sliding-scale pricing. And on the wall, a plaque read, In memory of Jin-suk Choi and Adana Abiola, mothers who taught us that healing begins with compassion. Minho stood beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly. So would yours. They'd open the clinic together, her medical knowledge, his business acumen and funding. Grace would work there 3 days a week while finishing her BSN. They'd already hired a staff of 6 nurses and 2 doctors, all committed to serving the community. Mrs. Choi? One of the nurses approached. The first patients are arriving. Are you ready? Grace looked at Minho. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile he saved only for her. Ready, she said. That night, they celebrated at home. Minho had Mrs. Park prepare a feast, half Korean, half Nigerian, a perfect blend of their worlds. Ji-woo joined them, along with Grace's sisters who'd come down from Fort Wayne for the weekend. Ngozi and Amaka had flourished at Street Catherine's. Ngozi was planning to apply to Northwestern for pre-law. Amaka talked constantly about veterinary school. They looked at Grace differently now, not as the sister who'd sacrificed everything, but as the woman who'd built something extraordinary from that sacrifice. You did it, Grace, Ngozi said, hugging her tight. You actually did it. We did it, Grace corrected, looking at Minho across the table. All of us. After dinner, after Ji-woo left and her sisters had gone to the guest rooms, Grace found Minho on the rooftop terrace, their place, where he'd first let her see his vulnerability. Thinking about your mother? She asked, joining him at the edge. Thinking about how much has changed in 6 months. He pulled her against his side, his arm around her waist. 6 months ago, you were a stranger I'd bought to secure my inheritance. Now you're the person I can't imagine living without. Grace tilted her face up to his. Do you have your inheritance yet? The council's approval. I got it last month. Full operational authority. The wedding photos convinced them. But mostly, it was the clinic. They'd never seen me build something that didn't involve violence or money. They think you civilized me. Did I? No. He cupped her face, his touch infinitely gentle. You just reminded me that I'm more than my father's legacy, that I can create instead of just control. He kissed her, then slow and deep, tasting of wine and promise. When they broke apart, Minho reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Grace's breath caught. I know we're already married, he said, opening the box to reveal a ring that took her breath away, a yellow diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum. But that was a contract, a transaction. He slid the ring onto her finger, right above her simple wedding band. This is a promise. Grace Abiola Choi. Will you marry me again? For real this time. Not because of debt or threats or council approval. Just because I love you and want to spend the rest of my life proving it. Tears blurred Grace's vision. Yes, God, yes. Minho pulled her into his arms, and Grace felt the last piece of her broken heart slot into place. She'd been bought as property and become a partner. Been trapped in a contract and found freedom in love. Been forced into a marriage and discovered home. I love you, she whispered against his chest. I love you, he echoed. More than power. More than empire. More than anything. 1 year later, the second wedding happened on a warm October afternoon in Millennium Park, surrounded by everyone who mattered. Grace wore a dress she'd chosen herself, ivory with delicate beading, her mother's cross at her throat, yellow roses in her bouquet. Minho stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, and when Grace walked down the aisle, the look on his face made her cry before she even reached him. This time, the vows were theirs. Not recited from a script, but spoken from the heart. I promise to choose you, Grace said, her voice steady and sure. Every day, even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. I promise to build our life with the same determination I survived with. I promise to love you not despite who you are, but because of it. Minho's eyes were suspiciously bright. I promise to protect you always, not because you need protecting, but because loving you means wanting to shield you from every hurt. I promise to support every dream you chase. I promise to hold you through every nightmare. I promise to be worthy of the choice you made to stay. You may kiss your bride, the officer said, smiling. Minho did tender and reverent, a kiss that tasted like forever. The reception spilled into the evening. Grace danced with her sisters, with Ji-woo, with Minho. She watched him laugh with his men, saw the respect in their eyes when they looked at her. She was no longer the dragon's bought bride. She was the dragon's queen, his equal, his partner in everything. Late in the night, Minho pulled her onto the balcony, away from the noise. Happy? He asked. Grace looked at the life they'd built, the clinic serving her old neighborhood, her sisters thriving, her degree almost complete, this man who'd given her everything by giving her the choice to stay. She thought about that night 6 months ago, when 3 men in expensive suits had stood in her doorway with a devil's bargain. How she'd thought her life was ending, how she couldn't have known it was actually beginning. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm happy." Minho kissed her forehead, the same gesture from their first wedding, but it meant something entirely different now. Not claiming, not obligation, just love. "Good," he murmured. "Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. There are decisions you make with your whole heart, and then there are decisions made with a knife at your family's throat." Grace had made both, but she'd learned that sometimes the choice made in darkness leads you to light, and the man who was supposed to be her prison became her home. Sometimes the person bought to save others saves you instead, and that, Grace thought as Minho held her close under the Chicago stars, was worth everything. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If this story touched your heart, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Click on the next video. It's darker, deeper, and even more unforgettable. You don't want to miss it, because in this world, blood may stain hands, but love stains the soul. Sometimes the person who buys your freedom becomes the one who teaches you what freedom really means. Have you ever found love in an unexpected place? Comment your story below.